Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by two broadcasters, both from the South Bend Cubs. I guess they do other things too. I'm joined by Brendan King and Max Thoma. Boys, it's good to have you back on. I know that we're here previewing the 2024 South Bend Cubs season, but I guess BK, you're on my screen first. How have things been going, dude?
Hey man, things are well. Thanks for having us. I do not have as eventful of a story as Max is about to tell for tonight, but yeah, things are good. I just wrapped up the my college hoop season. I was doing a lot of Indiana State games and getting ready just for the campaign. Man, we're going to take a trip, or at least I am going to take a trip to Arizona. Be good to see the guys, and I'll be out for the spring training prospects game against the Sox. So that should be something.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun. I mean, you're going straight from. I mean, that's a way to immerse yourself back into the Cubs experience is by just going straight down to Arizona and getting the whole experience down there.
No doubt. Yeah, I'm actually going to get a little spring training of my own too. I'm doing this is actually be pretty cool. I'm doing the Indiana State Indiana game in Terre Haute in a few weeks. So I know Max can attest, and he does a lot of games as well. But it's nice for us too, just to get a back into it because it's going to be April 5th before you know it. We're going to be in the Quad Cities, and they're going to tell you, hey, you got to talk for 3 hours, and that's our job. But still, it takes a couple weeks to get back at it. So. But no, about the prospects game. I mean, I know the roster, at least the Cubs one, was released today, and that was on the South Bend Cubs page. Big shout out, Kaylee Sedlacek, by the way. That was an awesome graphic by our great production manager. Yeah, I mean I think both rosters are going to be stacked, and looking forward to seeing the Montgomery kid too from the Sox. He is a Indiana high school guy and a legend of kind of Southern Indiana, so it'd be cool to see him.
That's true. I didn't even think about having Colson Montgomery as a part of that team too, and your guys is over in Indiana for sure. But Max, I mean, I got to kick it to you. If you guys are watching on YouTube, you see a gas pump in the background. If you guys aren't, if you're listening on the podcast form, trust me when I say that Max has some great lighting going on in that gas station parking lot. Max, how's it going, buddy?
This is the most well-lit gas station west of the Mississippi, and by west of the Mississippi, I can see it. It's about 100 away. Just entered into the show me state of Missouri on this 6.5 hour drive. So, yeah, pulled over, well-lit gas station, got some chips, so I feel like they can't really kick me out because I made a purchase. Shout out to Honey Barbecue, Fritos Twist things. Yeah, we're feeling good. I'm actually going to my first baseball series, 4 games the next 3 days. So, like BK said, it's really nice, especially with baseball when you're going to be talking for 3 hours plus, to get some games under your belt before our season officially kicks off.
Yeah, I can't thank you guys for coming on. We will not be going 3 hours plus here, unless you guys want to. I don't know. No, we won't be going 3 hours
Always game.
plus here. But yeah, you guys have both been on the show before, so nothing new. Today we are going to run through a preview of the 2024 South Bend Cubs season. As I kind of detailed last week with having Mick Gillespie on and going through the Tennessee Smokies projected roster, like these names that we're going through today, they're my projections as to what we might see in South Bend. We don't know who will be assigned to South Bend out the gate. That is still to be determined. But I want to be able to hit on certain guys, and so I've kind of assigned them to different levels right here, so we can hit on everybody we need to throughout this month of March. That is the affiliate preview month. But before we get into the players individually, I want to kick it to you guys to kind of recap last season, like in the span of like a few minutes. What were your favorite moments from that 2023 campaign that you saw from the booth all season long? I'll kick it to Max first on this one.
Got to start. I got 2 ones that come to fresh to the top of my mind. Got to start with the no-hitter. I had never been on the right side of one. So calling that in the 9th inning, my heart was pounding. That was such a cool moment. It was such a cool day. Michael Arias gets the start. I mean, I don't even think we knew that we hadn't allowed a hit because Arias was kind of struggling with the control those first few innings. And then you look up and it's like, we actually have not allowed a hit yet to this point. So that moment was super special. Frankie Scalzo Jr. finishing it off. Jared Wright was stellar in that game as well. And then I think underrated, one of my favorite moments of the year that maybe didn't get as like wide publicity as a lot of other major ones was Felix Stevens hitting home run number 25 and crying as he rounded the bases. I don't think anybody in our organization, outside of like the people in the clubhouse and the players and coaching staff, knew that he had set a goal preseason to hit 25 homers, which is a outrageous goal to make in minor league baseball, right? And he hit it, and he was just pouring with emotion as he rounded the bases. We saw him crying, and we were wondering, what's happening. He added a couple more, hit 27, but incredible year for an incredible guy, and that moment was just really special to kind of surmise and kind of cap off his season too.
I mean, for Felix Stevens to go and hit 27 home runs between Myrtle Beach and South Bend is a feat in itself. I mean, it's impressive to hit that many home runs, but to spend time in Myrtle Beach and still hit those home runs is pretty crazy. We'll talk about Felix a little bit later on for sure. BK, anything that stand out from the 2023 campaign for you?
Yeah, just a little tidbit on Stevens to follow up Max's point. Not only in the no-hitter did Arias probably not have his best stuff to begin, Felix Stevens is the reason why there's a no-no. He made two outstanding defensive plays, one of them a sprawling catch over at first base. So you got to credit all the guys on the bump, but I think there's a tip of the cap, too, to Felix Stevens on what he did in the infield. I'm going to cheat a little bit and not give necessarily a single moment. I'm going to talk about an experience, and that was the Matt Shaw experience. I mean, his first base hit, I remember Max's call, that triple off the right center field wall. He had another triple a couple weeks later that was just darted up the right field line, scored two. I mean, we went on the road. We were in West Michigan, and his average dropped under 400 for the first time. And you're like, what's going on? What's wrong? What's wrong with this guy? I mean, that's how. What'd you say, Max?
He's a slacker. Oh,
yeah. And you're like, what's going on? And but no, I mean, just the way that guy carried himself, the way he played short. I mean, that guy was working as hard as he could with D'Angelo Jimenez every single day, taking ground balls, and just a utmost pro as well. And what he's doing now in spring training, I don't think there's any coincidence as to. I mean, this guy is getting tweets that say he's going to play in the big leagues this year. I don't know where the hell they're supposed to put him because they're so stacked in the infield. You're kind of in a position where if he continues this, and you got to think if he goes to Double-A or wherever he goes and rakes, he's going to find his way to the big leagues. So yeah, I think my cheated answer is just the Matt Shaw experience, and I don't know if we had Nico Horner my first year. That was way back in 2018, but Nico only played 4 games. This guy's a stud, but we barely saw him. I mean, we got a good glimpse at Matt Shaw for a few weeks, a number of road trips, and guy's the real deal.
Yeah, the fact that he was able to make it up to Tennessee last year in his draft season was pretty remarkable. The fact that he'll be assigned probably to Tennessee, he might be assigned to Iowa. I don't know. Like that's the Matt Shaw experience is pretty wild. Mick last week called him a baseball player's baseball player, right? It's like your favorite player's favorite player type of vibe. He just he's a dirtbag in the best way possible. Like it's just I love watching Matt Shaw play baseball. That's for sure. Let's go ahead and lead things off when we're digging into this potential South Bend roster. Let's start off with starting pitchers here because you guys already mentioned Michael Arias, that no hitter that he was a part of last year, and I'm kind of expecting him to be assigned back to South Bend this year to kick off the season. He was out of the 40-man roster this offseason. He's still a starting pitcher. I think that if he's converted to relief, that he could fly up the system pretty quickly. But I'm kind of curious to see how the Cubs balance. Like, is he a starter? Is he a reliever? BK, you got any thoughts on Michael Arias, starter versus reliever?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thought that comes up is, does he take a Danny Palencia route? But I think the thing about Arias, which is so compelling and cool, is like, you take a peek at him, you've seen him live, Greg, that you could tell he is still growing into his body, as opposed to a Danny P, who was pretty well-rounded, even when he got to South Bend. I mean, that he is a large man. So I would be game either way. Would it be cool to see Arias fly up the radar and fly up the system as a reliever, just throwing 102? I'd be excited about that. But also, if he puts on 20, 30 pounds, what could he be as a starting pitcher, right? I mean, what can he add? And he's still so young, and there's probably still some stuff that he can bring along in his repertoire. So yeah, I think it's a little different than the Danny P route, just because Palencia, He's got the 2 good pitches. It seemed both big league ready. To me, Arias is still so raw, and it would be this South Bend season. Now we'll see where he goes, and we'll see what happens. But it'll tell a lot early what he looks like, in my opinion.
Max, we talked about I think when I was on the broadcast, I came on for an inning with you. I think when you were in Quad Cities, I would assume is where it was. We talked about how fast of an arm action that Arias has, right? Like that he looks like a shortstop up there. I mean, he was a former position player, and he looks like a shortstop up there, just slinging the ball, and it's coming out at 98, 99 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, especially like at our level, in Myrtle Beach, we have a lot of young kids, a lot of unfinished products. And even the guys that have been playing the same position their whole lives aren't finished products yet, whether that be physically or developmentally as well. But you talk about, a completely unfinished canvas. He's entering year 2 as a full-time pitcher now. I mean, the potential is boundless. And like BK said, I'm kind of really interested to see almost what he just physically looks like. When he comes off the bus, when we see him in the clubhouse the first time. He's had a handful of months, obviously, in the offseason to try and add some size. I'm sure he's going to be focused on, some control this year, because certainly at times last year that was a little bit sporadic. But that's what you'd expect with a kid that age, with that kind of arm motion, with that kind of velo, with that kind of spin on fastballs and movement, let alone a guy who hasn't been pitching that long in his life. So very interesting guy to keep an eye out on, because and I think we always hope that starting pitchers, when they make it to the bigs, are still starting pitchers, because you're cheering for that person and you're cheering for them to accomplish their goals. And if their goal is to be a starting pitcher for the Chicago Cubs, we want them to reach that goal. Shout out to the dog. I did hear that bark. Yeah, so Danny Palencia, Luke Little, I mean, we've seen it. And what an easy conversation it probably is for like a manager or somebody in player development to have with a guy like, hey, we don't want you to be a starter anymore, but hey, you might be in the MLB in a few months. Like, we're going to put you in the bullpen. If you go shove for like 2 months, you might be at Wrigley soon. So I feel like that's a pretty easy sell. And if they went that route with Arias, and he's locked in and pitching well, you could easily see him shoot up, because there's not another Michael Arias that I've seen in the Midwest League. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'll take that as a fallback option. If your fallback option is to be a reliever and make it up to the big leagues pretty quick, that's a pretty good fallback option.
Oh yeah, I mean, BK would be like, you're not going to be doing play-by-play, but you'll be doing pregame for the Cubs. He'd be like, yeah,
okay, yeah.
What do we even? Why are we having this conversation?
Twist my arm, yeah. I want to talk about Brody McCullough, because I always want to talk about Brody McCullough. We saw him go down with an injury. He was kind of rehabbing from the injury in the offseason. I think that we might see a delayed start to him this season when he's assigned to South Bend. But the hope is that we see him pretty quickly. I want to talk about Brody in South Bend this year because he's quickly become, whether it's the swagger on the mound or the way in which he pitches. I love Brody McCullough, man. I'm about that. His style. Max, you want to talk about what you saw from Brody last year and what you're kind of expecting from him this year?
I think swagger was the key word there. Panache would be one that I would maybe add to it, because we've had BK and I have been spoiled with incredible starting pitching over the last couple of years. It seems like so many guys almost even blend together because we've seen so many guys that can just go eat 4 to 6 innings and pitch so well. But yeah, he provides a certain energy and spark, and I think it was fun to see him before he got hurt. Get matched up with some of these other guys that came up from Myrtle Beach as well, because a lot of times it feels like guys almost become more of themselves when they're joined by guys they've been with most of the year, i.e. your Nick Holes or your Grant Kipps. Those guys spent so much time together that when you see them all together in South Bend, you kind of see more of their natural personalities, as opposed to somebody who's just come up, fresh to South Bend, freshly promoted, and just trying to, remake a name for themselves and reinsert themselves at that level. But in my mind, the word that comes to my mind outside of panache is just consistency. It felt like he became one of those guys after a few starts. He had a really good, I believe, kids game start. 11 home. And after that day, it felt like one of those guys where you're like, we can kind of pencil him in. He's pretty consistent. You kind of know what you're going to get after 5 innings. We're going to have a pretty good chance to win today.
BK, Max mentioned a couple of other guys that were former college or draft picks or signees Grant Kipp and Nick Hull. And if we're expecting to see Grant Kipp and Nick Hull back in South Bend, it's probably in the rotation. They could probably piggyback too. There's a lot of different rotation options. But those guys they just kind of go out and get the job done, both Kipp and Nick Hull.
There's no doubt. I remember, aside from us stalking Grant Kipp's LinkedIn page last year to find out what classes and what he majored in at Yale, that guy was just consistent. And you take a look at his ERA for the year, I think it's a little inflated. There were some things that happened and some calls made that maybe sparked that a little bit. I think he was just fine in South Bend. Really smart, intelligent to talk to. I mean, to just talk the world of pitching. I mean, not just that he's a Yale guy, but he's just super mature and intelligent. And, he actually breaks down. There was the clip last year of him like he struck out a guy and he held the exact positioning of where his release point was. I thought that was super cool. I mean, he gets into that world of pitching. And, I remember talking with Max and a group of other people that, about Hull and about Kipp and about McCullough, about, our rotation in April, pending all those guys being back, is going to be pretty darn good. Yeah. And, that South Bend having a rotation like that, I think back to 2022 when we won the title, the rotation was absolutely stacked, beginning with Cole and Luke Little, and Palencia was in there. And I'm probably forgetting a couple names by now, but it has that type of feel. And the same thing with Nick Hull, because he came in and it was sort of the same spot as, remember when Luis Devers came to South Bend back in 2022, the rotation was so good that Devers had to pitch out of the bullpen, which was ridiculous. And that's really what started the legend of Luis Devers. Same thing for Hull. He joined us on a road trip, had to pitch piggyback, and he finally got his shot in the rotation. Looked really good. And kind of the same thing as Kipp. Guy throws strikes, doesn't walk a lot of guys either. And that's usually going to win you some games in the Midwest League.
Yeah, Nick Holt, it was funny because he got kind of thrown in. I mean, if you remember, we were in Lake County and we had a starter go 1 inning because Lake County started a game that should have never been started. We've seen that movie before. And then we didn't play the next day. So our rotation, we just didn't have the bodies to, throw this doubleheader, throw a completion game. So Hull got called over from Myrtle, flew there that day. We thought he might pitch. Then the next game got banged, so I don't even think he wound up pitching until maybe the final day. And that series as well, I think, was a big one for Grant Kipp because he had to face this Lake County captain's lineup that threw 9 lefties against him. And it's like, how is he going to go about his business today? And that curveball has so much depth. And when he can get that slider really working with it as well, because the curveball was money. He was living fastballs away. And he, I think, pitched even better than his numbers were that day. And that was kind of an eye-opener when you can go against a young, very quality team at the time, face 9 guys all batting from the left side and pitch that well, come in with a good game plan and go out and execute.
Yeah, that is pretty fun. I think that this rotation this year, at least to start off the year, you're going to have a really good mix of guys that they're bringing consistency to your team, right? With Hull and Kipp, McCullough. And then there's also a little bit of spark with Michael Arias, and you're going to get Drew Gray very likely up from Myrtle Beach, and Marino Santi might be up there too. And those are 3 guys that Marino Santi's a little bit different, right? Marino Santi is he might be in the bullpen, he might be in the rotation, but he's just fastball, curveball, and maybe the best curveball in the entire organization. But Marino Santi's weird because he gets a lot of ground balls, and when you're thinking about a curveball, like a fastball curveball pitcher, a lot of times it's like a fly ball type pitcher, more times than not. And Marino Santi's super ground ball heavy. He's gonna be fun to watch. But Drew Gray, you guys are gonna get a front row seat to Drew Gray, and man, I can't wait for this kid to break out because I know that when the Cubs drafted Drew Gray out of high school, and then he ended up undergoing Tommy John surgery and battled back. He was in Myrtle Beach at the same time as Jackson Ferris, who was, of course, traded away as a part of the Michael Busch trade. They're both IMG Academy guys, both lefty pitchers, both have a good fastball, both have a good curveball. I'm excited to see what Drew Gray can do because there's a lot of spin from Drew Gray in that curveball, and then a lot of spin with the fastball really riding up, which I think is something that Brody McCullough does well too. And I think Drew Gray can kind of mimic that from the left side a little bit. So that's gonna be exciting to see.
Yeah, I think the clips I've seen, you kind of took it, what I was going to say, induced vertical break with Drew Gray, because that fastball just looks like it's popping coming out, right? It looks like it's almost rising out of his hand. But also, a lefty who think about, when it comes like prospect rankings, was sitting behind a Jackson Ferris, a DJ Hers, a Jordan Wicks. You think about three lefties. Wicks is in the bigs. The other two aren't in the org anymore. Not that we're running low on lefties, you know what I mean? But I think a lot of eyes and a lot of attention on what Gray can do in South Bend this year.
I think it's exciting to watch and see him kind of take that next step, because there's a whole lot of faith that the Cubs are putting in Drew Gray, moving on from DJ Hers and moving on from Jackson Ferris. I mean, you like to have some lefty depth in your organization. You guys haven't seen a whole lot of lefties come through South Bend. And so to put that faith in Drew Gray to take that next step is going to be huge. And I think that, like, we saw not great command from Drew Gray last year, but that's kind of like the last thing to come back when you return from Tommy John, right? So, like, if he can get that command under control, I think that he's going to have a pretty damn good year, honestly.
Yeah, and to me, when you're at that level of the minors, I mean, that's not as concerning to me, because you're going to get so many opportunities to go out and do it over and over and over again, especially in your first or second year. So, you mentioned Santi too. I just think about whether he pitches out of the bullpen or the rotation. I think about a guy, it's not necessarily known or in the top 30, but listen, lefties that can give you long relief out of the bullpen. I think of a guy like Dalton Stombaugh, who had a great start a couple years ago, got the call up to Double-A Tennessee, and did his thing. I mean, that is invaluable in the minor leagues, especially at our level. A guy that can go multiple innings out of a bullpen. Max, who is that lefty from Quad Cities that just tortured us? You know who I'm talking? The short little lefty from Quad City. He just killed us. Short guy. I apologize to him because I'm blanking on the name, but guy would come out of the bullpen, pitch 3 scoreless, and he did it twice a series, and he wouldn't get for whatever reason, the Royals would not send him to Double-A, and he would just torch us. But anyway, yeah, I mean, that is so valuable, especially at our level, a lefty reliever that could go multiple innings.
Wasn't Riley Martin doing that when he was with you guys? Was he going multiple innings?
He was.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
He was dynamite. And it's funny, we had a decent stretch last year where we did not have a lefty on the team.
Yeah, which is crazy.
So every team would come in and he'd be like, switch hitter. It's like, well, he's gonna be batting lefty all week.
Yeah. Don't even have to put switch next to his name on the scoreboard.
Are you even hitting righty in practice? Because we got a whole week of this.
No right-handed development coming from the switch hitters. I think it's interesting with Riley Martin and Marino Santi. I think that you could see Marino Santi kind of following the same path as what Riley Martin has, where Riley Martin in South Bend was a multiple inning reliever. I think he even might have started a couple of games and went 3 or 4 innings.
Yeah.
And we might see that from Marino Santi this year. And then as Riley Martin has kind of climbed the ladder, he's gone more to that 1 inning role. But he's also kind of a fastball, curveball guy, throwing in the sweeper every once in a while. But those guys are super similar. So I'm kind of curious on how Marino Santi continues to follow that path that Riley Martin has kind of laid out. All right, since we're already kind of talking about Marino Santi and the bullpen potentially, let's go to the relievers that we might see in South Bend this year. I've got 5 kind of penciled in as guys that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. I think you've seen a few of these guys, and Giovanni Cabrera has been up in South Bend, right? And I know Yozan Okendo has been there as well. Has Jose Ramirez been up to South Bend? Did he get a cup of coffee there last year? No. We saw Jose Romero in the Arizona Fall League. That's what I'm thinking of. But
he was fantastic last year, though.
He was fantastic in Myrtle Beach. He went to the Arizona Fall League, which was kind of surprising to see him there, and performed really well. I think you guys have your closer in Jose Romero, which is super exciting, because I think that South Bend's had some pretty damn good closers over the past few years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about Frankie Scalzo Jr. last year. It's also fun to see how bullpen guys are adjusted throughout the year, because they'll always find their niche, and the coaching staff will always work with them. But you think about what Frankie was doing last year. He was like Mr. Bridge. He was Mr. Long Relief in April. And then he was just so dominant. Eventually, it's like, let's see if this guy can go get the 25th, 26th, 27th out of the game. And he was just absolutely money at the end of games, and his role just completely changed. But especially at high A, you start to see exactly where guys are going to try to pencil in. Is he a setup guy? Is he a closer? Is he more of a bridge? Is he a long reliever? But it's always interesting to see how those guys kind of pan out, because Frankie finished the year, second half was way different than the first half in terms of his expected role.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when we did the Tennessee Smokies preview last week with Mick, We talked about some guys that are lights out, right? It's Zach Lee is kind of the first guy that comes to mind. The Porter Hodge, as long as he's in the bullpen. Some guys that are like really high profile relievers as far as like prospects go, right? You don't really put prospects and relievers in the same boat a lot of times. I think that in South Bend this year, you got a few guys that are hoping to make that next step in the Jose Romeros. Even Sam Armstrong is a guy that I've got to kept my eye on. He performed well in Myrtle Beach last year. Cohen Moreno, who was another high school draft pick back in 2020, he'll likely be in South Bend. Another kind of multi-inning reliever type role for Cohen Moreno. I think there's several guys that you're like wanting to make that next step up. BK, you don't see a whole lot of like true relief prospects in South Bend. It's that kind of transition level in a lot of ways, from like from starter to now you're a reliever, or now you're a single inning guy from a multi inning guy. You want to talk about that transition a little bit?
For sure. And, as true as that is too, Greg, it's interesting because every year I've been in South Bend, we've had like a dynamite closer, and it's been the only guy that has pitched in that role. My first year, who was, he was great at the time, and it just didn't work out. Brian Glowicki was a shutdown man in 2018. Ethan Roberts in 2019, ever heard of him? I mean, he's back on a minor league deal this year. I think about the championship in 22, Michael McAveen, Jeremiah Estrada, and then, last year with Max talking about Frankie Scalzo Jr. closing out games. So there's always seemingly been one guy that does it, but I think it's been a matter of, Greg, everybody being able to just play their role. And to me, that was a huge part of what made Lance Reimel such a good manager. The buy-in from the clubhouse, younger guy. I think he's going to do great at Double-A Tennessee this year. I think I know you and Mick talked about the potential for that, but yeah, I think more than anything, it was just guys knowing their role. Clayton Mortensen did a great job with the pitchers, and I think everybody in today's age knows exactly either A, how much they're going to throw, or B, if they get into trouble, they know what their cap is. So yeah, I mean that transition has been pretty seamless for the guys that have done it.
You guys want to talk hitters?
Oh yeah,
let's do it.
All right. I think we got to lead off with, it seems like the guys that everybody is talking about this offseason, we saw them in Myrtle Beach last year after they got drafted. It's Brian Calmer and Jonathan Long. And those two guys are kind of playing the corner infield positions, first and third. I know you guys didn't get a chance to watch them a ton while they were playing in Myrtle Beach, but as they're up to South Bend, I think it's going to be interesting because the Cubs have seen this first base, this corner infield type profile with Matt Mervis in years past, with Hayden McGeary in years past. And these are guys with Mervis, he was undrafted in the weird 2020 draft, obviously. Hayden McGeary was kind of a lower round draft pick after putting up ridiculous numbers at Colorado Mesa in college. Both Johnny Long and Brian Calmer are guys that are like lower draft picks that you're like hoping they really start to take off in a way that Matt Mervis and Hayden McGeary did. What do those guys kind of have to do at South Bend to kind of quickly get that call up to Tennessee? I'll kick it to you first, BK.
Well, if you want to be Matt Mervis or Hayden McGeary, you got to hit the cover off the ball starting April 5th because they wasted absolutely zero time. I mean, I've told this story before, being in Fort Wayne, and Merv has discussed it before, of like that one swing off of the lefty from Fort Wayne, Vela, left on left, curveball, double up the line. He was like, that was the start of MASH Mervis, and being there to witness it, I still remember that hit to this day. But McGeary, we're in Quad Cities last year. I personally didn't know much about the guy besides meeting him that week and doing, Max and I doing our general research on him. But watching him take BP for the first time, you step back, you're like, all right, well, let's see what we get this week. And even against that Mississippi River wind at good old modern Woodman Park, this guy was hitting freaking Ferris wheel shots. And his first bomb, you kind of just took a step back. You're like, oh my God. And then what's crazy about McGeary is he did it faster than Merv did. McGeary was in South Bend shorter than Mervis, which is nuts. So that brings up the next point. How do you do that if you're the next first baseman coming in? I mean, you're going to get the opportunity to hit third, fourth, or fifth every day. And really, I think it comes down to something that Merv talked about a lot, attacking the fastball, because you're going to get to see quite a few of them probably in your first couple of weeks because you don't necessarily have that profile yet. Maybe in May you'll start seeing less fastballs, but you're going to get some heaters to start April, and it's up to you to match them.
Yeah, it's they're gonna have to show out immediately. I think that there's probably unrealistic expectations on Calmer and Jonathan Long following McGeary and Mervis. Like that's to expect something like that is just it's not fair. It's not fair to those guys. I was very careful, like in my offseason prospect rankings, to not throw them in the top 30 rankings. That's just I'm careful about doing that with first base profiles, anyways. But you just can't expect a Hayden McGeary, Matt Mervis type of performance from Brian Calmer and Jonathan Long. Now, is it something that I'm excited to potentially see happen? Of course I am, but I also look at that first base position and is Brian Calmer playing mostly first base? I know Jonathan Long has been playing mostly first base when he's appearing in Major League Spring Training games after playing third base in Myrtle. But then you got this third guy that we already talked about a little bit. I don't see a whole lot of space for Felix Stevens up in Double A, even though he's probably earned it. So we might see Felix Stevens back in South Bend. Then you got this three-headed monster of guys who can play first base in South Bend. And really, Felix Stevens has proven it the most, Max.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a luxury if they're all in South Bend to me. Sounds like we could have a lot of April cold home runs. But, I mean, in terms of like what those guys have to do to match it, I mean, for Calmer, he's just got to do exactly what he did, right?
Yeah.
I mean, looking at his numbers, and, BK and I don't get to watch a ton of at least live Myrtle Beach Pelicans games because we're often playing or prepping. Outside of that Sunday night slot. It's always nice. You can always catch them in, especially if we're coming from a game off the bus on the road. But we saw a ton of him on Twitter. Man, I saw so many Calmer highlights in late August and early September because it just felt like Nelson Velasquez in the fall league a couple of years ago, or Mervis too, where it's like, oh, here's another video of a Calmer homer. Like, oh, is that yesterday? It's like, oh no, it actually just happened. You're like, oh, he's done it again. Okay. But he seemed like, looking at the numbers, like a really, true outcome kind of guy, where a ton of walks, a lot of home runs, a lot of strikeouts, which is, I don't think Felix nearly walks to a similar kind of rate, though the sample was obviously small for Calmer. But excited to see those guys. It's always fun to see power guys come to South Bend in April. It's a pitcher-friendly ballpark. It's going to be pitcher-friendly weather. A couple years ago on opening day when we went into the 10th inning, it was snowing. So you just never know what can happen. It's really tough to slug that early. I know Calmer's a Gonzaga guy, right? So I'm sure he played some crummy weather in his playing days. But I think Long is a Long Beach State guy.
He is, yeah.
I love a good dirtbag. So it's the best nickname in college sports, Long Beach State dirtbag. So
it is. You mentioned the strikeouts from Calmer. The strikeouts from Felix Stevens were, concerning. Obviously we talk about the power. He had I think it was a 32% strikeout rate, somewhere around there. Max, what do you think that we have to see from Felix in terms of lowering his strikeouts to make sure that power, like he's got insane power, like current power potential, raw power, in-game power, it's all there, whether it's over the fence, doubles, whatever it is. In order to be up in Double-A Tennessee and then up in Triple-A Iowa, where do we have to see that strikeout rate fall to? Does it have to be a 25%? Can he get away with it being a 30%? Like, what are we looking at with Felix Stevens?
I'm not sure the exact level, but I do now think to Owen Casey that first half last year where the strikeout rate was astronomical, but he was like the face of the earth. So, that's a fine needle to try to thread. But with Felix, I'm hoping you're coming back and getting a more veteran, more mature approach, because I'm sure BK can attest to this too. He absolutely mashed up there, but it definitely felt like there was maybe an AB a game or a couple or something where he felt like he went up and didn't really have a game plan or an approach and was just overly aggressive. And there'd be at bats that he had throughout the year that were kind of like Kevin Alcantara at bat in April, where he just swung in a few non-competitive pitches and just kind of gave the AB away. So I'm looking to see if he can work kind of deeper into counts, still have that kind of level of aggressiveness when it comes to, you want him to send the ball over the wall 25 times, right? See if he can maybe hit 30 this year, but see if he can walk more, and cutting down on those strikeouts is going to be huge. See if he can't, put the ball in play a little bit more.
We're sitting here at the 35-minute mark or so, and I have not brought up the name Jefferson Rojas, which seems like a crime on my part, because Jefferson Rojas is one of the prospects I'm most excited for to watch this year. We watched him tear it up in Myrtle Beach last year. I know, again, you guys didn't get the chance to see him much in Myrtle Beach, but we're seeing Jefferson Rojas, shortstop, 19 years old, getting a lot of run in Major League Spring Training, right? He is playing a lot of games for the Chicago Cubs in spring training at 19 years old. That's wild to me. That reminds me of what we saw from Ed Howard a few years ago when the Cubs were really high on him and he was playing in some Major League Spring Training games. BK, what excites you most about Jefferson Rojas and seeing him play at such a young age at that level?
Just another guy to add to the lineage of that South Bend Cubs shortstop fraternity, man. I mean, throw in, like you said, Ed, and then where does Christian Hernandez fit in at some point too? So I mean, the depth of that middle infield. I mean, I've heard it being close with Sam Wiederhalf. Max and I both are. It's just legendary tales of this guy. And hey, here's the thing: he's going to come prepared, knowing what Buddy Bailey did with him last year. There was never a guy when Buddy Bailey is sending a guy to the next level, one thing and one thing only, that guy is going to be ready after hours of ground balls, video, talking with Buddy personally. I mean, that guy is a master of developing, especially infield talent. I mean, the guy, when he was the bench coach in Boston, I mean, he was working every day with Nomar. The list goes on. So I think one thing also has to be said too, of you kind of got to temper your expectations almost in April, because if there's one thing about young shortstops, they're going to make some errors and it might take them a little bit to get going with the bat. Now, there are some guys where necessarily that wasn't exactly happening. I mean, Kevin Alcantara, like Max said, he needed to learn how to grind out an AB, but he hit some absolute moonshots in April. So, where do you judge that? So I think, if you see some tweets in April about some errors at shortstop in South Bend, throw it right away. Doesn't matter. I'm excited to see the kid in person.
Yeah, I think that I've kind of repeated on the show that as tough as it is to hit in Myrtle Beach, just in general, with how the ballpark and how the league in general kind of zaps your power, try April in South Bend on for size. He's going from a place where it's impossible to hit to another place where it's going to be impossible to hit for the first month or two. I want to be careful about, like, we've been super excited about Jefferson Rojas all offseason. We've been super excited about Jefferson Rojas this spring. If he does get off to a Kevin Alcantara tough start, right, in the first month of the season, it's like, let's not overreact to the opposite way. Let's not like freak out and say like, this kid is not legit like we expected him to be. This is not a top 100 guy in baseball like we hoped. I think it's like when you're watching him in May, June, July, that's the more kind of real experience. And even still, he's a 19-year-old playing in South Bend. Like, my expectation with Jefferson Rojas is if he can hit over the course of the year and have like an OPS just above league average, like, I will take that. I think that's a really strong season from Jefferson. If he can play like decent shortstop, if he can hit just above league average, like, that's a really strong performance from this kid in South Bend for sure. So really excited to see what he can do. Let's go to a guy that you guys have seen a couple years in a row. Ed Howard, obviously dealing with that really severe injury a couple of years back. Wasn't 100%. It didn't seem like last year during his time in South Bend. We saw him go down to Australia this offseason, get a few weeks in playing time down there. Let's kind of expect. We did see him announced as a part of the spring breakout roster. We're not covering the spring breakout rosters today. That game is later this week of the time of the episode dropping. But we did see Ed Howard on that spring breakout roster, which I thought was a pretty, like, that's a vote of confidence from Cubs front office in that regard. So, Max, you want to talk a little bit about Silk and what we've seen from him in the past couple of years and kind of how that sets our expectations for him in 2024?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I do just want to say one thing on Rojas. Temper your expectations for a kid, let alone like how few teenagers start in the Midwest League. Throw Ethan Salas out the window because that guy's an outlier and he doesn't count as like a 17-year-old in Fort Wayne. But yeah, I mean, Ed Howard is like, when I first met Ed, you're like, it was so obvious why anybody would want to draft this kid, because he just felt like he was the most mature person in any room he ever walked into, let alone the talent, which was like just obviously abound. He was, they call him Silk, right? He's so smooth out there defensively. Him and Luis Vasquez are like my favorite two, I think, like defensive shortstops I've seen. Luis Vasquez is finally getting some attention. But But yeah, Ed was like the most respectable, mature kid I'd ever met. And I was shocked. I'm like, this guy's younger than me. That's embarrassing. Like, I'm nowhere near. But we saw some good moments from Ed last year. BK and I'm sure will always remember that first game back. Had a few hits. It was so exciting to see him back, see his family, because his family's, Chicagoland area, not that far away of a drive. But after an offseason, we talked about Michael Arias and what his body's going to look like coming back. Ed finally got some innings and some ABs, and also got some time off as well. So is he going to be moving more like he did before that freak injury? I think is TBD, but he's a guy that just absolutely everybody is rooting for, because you have to, because he's Ed Howard. He's like the best guy around. Him at CubsCon in 2023, he was like a hero, and he everybody wanted to see him. Everybody wanted to say hi. They were all hoping he'd be okay. He'd be back to health. They were all asking him how he was. It's like walking around with like an all-star. It was special, and I think we're all hoping Ed gets back, because we saw he had a game at Cedar Rapids too, a perfect game field that was phenomenal. If he can get more regular playing time too, because coming off the injury, he was out there a couple games a week, it felt like, but some more consistency. I'm sure the offseason was big for him in that capacity too.
BK, so me, Brian, and Zumac on this show a few episodes back, I don't want to repeat the show entirely, but like we were talking about Ed and what might be the most valuable thing for him in his development moving forward. And we were kind of debating back and forth with, is him being just like this stud defensive shortstop the best way to kind of like lean on that as your like carrying trait? Or is it something where like he kind of shows off as much athleticism as he can, playing different positions around the diamond? Because I know like now we have like Jefferson Rojas might be the starting shortstop in South Bend. We haven't talked about Pedro Ramirez yet, but Pedro Ramirez might be the starting second baseman. And then you got Calmer, you got Long at third. Like there's not like a clear cut like starting role for Ed Howard. So like how do you kind of view his development? Do you think that it's like, I am this defensive shortstop that Luis Vasquez was for so long, right? Before Luis Vasquez broke out with the bat last year, he was that just like, I'm a really good defensive shortstop, and maybe the bat breaks out a little bit. Or do you lean on that athleticism that Ed Howard has and say like, maybe he can play some center field. He can play both positions up the middle on the infield. He can play some corner if he wants to. Like, how do you kind of view that balance on like, what is Ed Howard moving forward?
Really good question. If there's anybody that Max and I have associated with the last 2 years that you can literally tell them, hey, go get your glove, you're going to go play X, Y, or Z, except pitcher or catcher, it's Ed. I mean, if you told him to grab a glove and play left, I'm sure he would just fine. I mean, we saw James Triantos play center last year, and Max can attest to this having the conversation with him. Never played center. Like, okay, now you're playing center field in a pro game. Sounds good. It's a great question, because I think if they give him the opportunity to go play short from the start, they're going to have a really hard time taking it away from him from a glove standpoint. If the bat doesn't translate, that's another story. Like you said, it's kind of like a Jason Hayward type deal where the glove's so good, you got to have it out there, but the bat struggled, so what do you do? But to me, last year, Greg, like Max talked about, when Ed came back, I thought from a body standpoint, he looked excellent. He looked a lot stronger than he was in 22. To me, in 22, he was still kind of like high school body type feel when he got hurt. And then he came back this year. And I mean, the guy looked like he just got back from the NFL Combine. He was jacked. I can't wait to see him and what he looks like now. And then what you talked about earlier, being on the roster for the spring training game against the Sox. More than anything, it's going to be cool for him. But that's kind of, to me, like rewarding a prospect and almost a mental skills type little booster. Like, you're going to get a shot to go play against the Southsiders, where you literally grew up and you were rooting for them, and those were your boys. And now you get a chance to go just throw it right back at him. I mean, and Ed Howard's a very competitive guy. So I look forward to seeing him getting a couple ABs against the Sox.
Can I just quickly say there are a few things as frustrating as when we finally get our players in South Bend and they show up to Four Winds Field, seeing how everybody's body transformed in the off season, and then BK and I, it's like, well, we still look like crap. Last year, I went up to somebody and it was just like, I'm like, man, everybody hit put on like 15 to 20 pounds of muscle. PCA, when we saw him at CubsCon, we're like, that was like a different human.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, I also put on 20 pounds. Not fun. Like, it was not good 20 pounds. It was like Midwest winter 20 pounds.
That really starts to hit as soon as you walk in the front gates of Four Winds Field every year, huh?
Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, you guys are pro athletes.
Yes.
Work out the entire off season. Yeah.
Oh man, let's go. There's a few more guys I want to talk about. I think on this list of names that I have, I think there's only one more guy that you guys have seen play in South Bend, and that's my boy Parker Chavers. I want to get your take on him. You saw him for I think just about a week, maybe 2 weeks towards the end of the year. Did you see Parker Chavers? What's your take on the streakiness that is Parker Chavers? Because like we've seen him as a pro. We saw him do this in college too. Obviously, once he became a pro, he dealt with some injury problems, but like his hot streaks are insane, and his cold streaks are also insane on the opposite way. But like, I really like what I see from Parker Chavers, the baseball player. I just want to see some more consistency from him. What did you guys see? I guess Max, what did you guys see when he spent that short time in South Bend last year?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I want to see him back, and I want to see him out there and starting and playing more because I think that'd be we learn a lot more than what a lot of guys we only see a little bit at the end in September, and Chambers was one of those kind of guys. But energy, kind of spark, kind of like a Cole Roederer build, right? Just a great defensive player out there. He's got good speed, covering ground in right field. I think is primarily where he was doing duty defensively for us. But a great base runner too. Guy who's going to take an extra base. I like the spark that he brings for sure, and the hot streaks are there, and we'll see if we can get some more consistency. But a guy we're looking forward to, I think, seeing more because when he played well, and he played very well in moments too with South Bend, they're just there's not a spot for everybody, especially at the end of the season when you just gotten called up. But I think he'll have some moments to shine with us this year for sure.
BK, there's going to be a lot of rotating. There's going to be a rotating cast out in the outfield, I think, in South Bend this year between Chavers. You'll have Brett Bateman, who was a draft pick last year. I think Jacob Wetzel might be back there again this year. Rafael Morel plays all over the diamond, but he can play some right field too. I think that like it's really important in the minor leagues, and South Bend's a good level to do this, to see a lot of like rotation in that outfield. I think this team might see that for sure.
I do too. It'll be good to see Wetz if he's back. I mean, that guy owns the pretzel stand after we made that video last year. That was well done by Kaylee Sedlacek and team. Also, I'm not sure from a catching standpoint, but if Ethan Hearn's back too, you put Ethan Hearn and Jacob Wetzel together, you're going to get some good content 24 hours a day, every single day of the week. I'm really excited to finally at last see Rafael Morel. It's almost like he was like a video game like villain that somebody alludes to, and you don't see him for hours and hours. And that's really what he was in 19, because Buddy came up to me after watching Chris Morel take BP. Buddy goes, "You ever see his brother?" I said, "No." I said, "No." He goes, he could be better. I said, "Oh, that got the antenna up a little bit." But now it's 2024. That was 2019. We've had a world pandemic in between, and now we're at last going to see Rafael Morel, hopefully in South Bend, Indiana. I know at that point he was in the DSL and he was super young. I'm just joking. But, I mean, if he – and, you could ask Sam Wiederhaft this for sure, but just looking forward to seeing him in person. If he has 50% of the energy that his brother has, I mean, this dude is still going to be the most energetic guy on the field. I mean, being with his brother for just a short amount of time until he got hurt was unreal. And I can't wait to see Rafael.
Yeah, I think that Rafael Morel just seemed like did he actually exist? Because we saw him so long, like he'd been in the organization for so long, and he like really broke out last year. Between Rafael Morel and you'll probably see Rojas Garcia as well this year. I think those two guys were the most consistent hitters in the Myrtle Beach lineup all year long. In a lineup that had some pretty damn good players in Myrtle. So you'll get both those guys, and I'm sure I think the theme with this year's team is there's going to be more than 9 players that can slot into a lineup that are all very like similar level, similar skill level, similar performance level. But they're all going to get kind of like a full season's worth of at bats because they're so flexible positionally. Like Rojas Garcia, he'll be out there. He'll play some second base, some third base. Probably some even first and some short if you need him to. You got Rafael Morel, who can play literally all over the diamond. He can play all three outfield positions. He can play first, second, third. You got even Ed Howard, like we mentioned. Jefferson Rojas can be at second and short. There's a whole lot of positional flexibility. And I think that's huge. And I think the coaching staff is going to have a great time being able to kind of plug these guys in wherever they want.
Do you think, and I haven't seen enough of Ravage, but and people might forget that my first year at South Bend in 2021, we had him for, I think, 9 games.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a quick cup of coffee. But is he offensively somewhat similar to an Ezekiel Pagan? Because it seems like the contact level is there. I don't know about the eye at the plate, but in terms of, like, he's not a guy who's going to hit a ton of home runs. I don't think he had any till last year when he hit 3. But it'd be nice to have somebody who can kind of plug that Ezekiel Pagan role, who can just go out there and hit 300 and seemingly have a hit or two, it feels like, every day, and hit a pitch just about anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good comp, actually. I kind of like that, where it's like I think that Ravage will probably say again.
And I haven't seen him a ton, so
I think that Ravage will probably strike out a little bit more than Pagan did. I think he'll walk a little bit more than Pagan did, because like Ezekiel he didn't do much of either of those. He didn't strike out or walk a lot. He was swinging a lot up there. I think Ravage will draw some more walks. But yeah, I think that his size, his stature is that, like, you're not going to see a whole lot of pop from him. You're hoping that, like, the power that develops with Ravage is going to be like the doubles power and showing off his speed a little bit, where he's kind of powering up to down the right field line and getting legged out of triple. So he's just a fun, like, like Ezekiel Pagan is. Like, Ravage is just a really fun player to watch. And I think that Rafael Morel is actually like the opposite, where like he is like very deliberate in his approach at the plate, where he's going to work some deep counts. At least he did last year. He was working some deep counts where, like, he gets down 0-2, but then battles back to 3-2. And then puts together some really impressive at bats. Not always the most fun at bats to watch. I mean, if you're like a real nerd and into that kind of thing, like, yeah, I guess so. But like, he's not swinging the bat nearly as much as Ravage and Ezekiel Pagan were. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun, like, rotating cast of players. I think that like I said, the coaching staff is going to have a heck of a time with trying to fit these guys in. I haven't mentioned Brett Bateman yet. I think that's the last guy I kind of want to mention today. This Cubs organization over the past few years has had a ton of really good center fielders. The DJ Wilsons, the Connor Myers, the guys that, like, maybe they didn't hit a whole lot, but like they could go out there and get it in center field. In addition to, like, obviously, like Pete Crow Armstrong and Kevin Alcantara. But Brett Bateman just follows in that line of really good defensive center fielders that the Cubs have drafted and developed and worked and been super successful down at the lower levels of the minors. But like Brett Bateman, I think that is a guy that probably gets penciled in atop the lineup. He's a leadoff guy. He's a center fielder. He's at, like, you know when you go into like MLB The Show, or like when you're in like creating players when you're younger, and you're like, I just need like a prototypical leadoff center fielder. Like that's Brett Bateman, right? He contact off the charts. He's not going to hit for a lick of power, but like that's okay, because he can go out there and get it in center field,
Yeah, no doubt. No, I was going to say too. I mean, add even way back in the day, a guy like Chris Singleton into the list. I mean, he was not necessarily a power hitter, and of course, Chris has an unbelievable story personally. But yeah, I think we've had people like that before. That's a necessity where we are at this stage in the minors too, Greg, where you just need guys that are going to get on base. If you're going to have a Matt Mervis, you need a guy that's going to get on so he can get his ribbies, right? So, I mean, that's a super important part of the lineup.
Yeah, I think that Brett Bateman's going to go a long ways in helping out that pitching staff in South Bend. So might help some ERAs along the way. But all right, guys, that's all I've got as far as players. I want to kick it to you. I'll kick it to you first, BK. Any guys in particular that you're like super excited to watch this year? Anything that you're just excited about the season in general?
Well, is that guys that are going to be in South Bend, or just kind of organizational in general?
Organization wide. You can be South Bend or organization wide.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got to kick it to one of our favorites. I'm super pumped for Cole Franklin that he's going to get really the first opportunity in his career. So last year was like first healthy year, right? This is the first time he's ever had, all right, I don't have the injury just in the rear view where I'm just getting going again. This is full-fledged. He's getting released. He's ready to roll. Full power for Arsenal stuff. I mean, looking forward to being in AZ and watching some sides and watching some guys throw. I think he took a major step last year with his changeup. The curveball was already dynamic. I mean, he's always had a lively fastball. But I mean, to me, his ticket to the big leagues, and this is the case with a lot of guys too. I mean, you could probably say the same about Brody McCullough and others, but your ticket to the big leagues is going to be your changeup. I think we talked about that even last year, Greg. Of if you can find a way to develop that pitch as a starter, I mean, who's turning their back on you? Not many. And I think that pitch again was dynamic last year. And who knows what he continues to add to the arsenal? As the Cubs pitching department continues to grow, and all smarter than us minds are in there. I mean, Cole Franklin, with how tall he is and how strong he is, I mean, that's going to be fun.
It sounds like he's working on a sinker this offseason. So I think that's
That's
actually going to
spooky.
be huge, right? I think that's huge
That's
for
spooky.
his development. Because like that's been the big thing with Cole is like that fastball shape. And so like if he can get that fastball shape down with a new sinker, like that's huge. Especially because last year he started to pitch to contact a little bit more, where he was like finding the zone a little bit more. And if he can get pitching to contact and people are hitting that sinker just like beating into the ground, that's a game changer for Cole Franklin and what he looks like as a starting pitcher. I don't know, man. With Cole, like there's always these guys, these prospects that are coming up and you're like, oh, like I kind of see them as a reliever more than a starter. Like even through all the ups and downs of Cole Franklin's career up to this point, like I still view Cole Franklin as a starting pitcher. Like in my eyes, like when I close my eyes and picture what Cole Franklin's doing on a field, it's always as a starting pitcher. I don't know what it is, but like that's the vibe he gives off. And I think it's probably that constantly changing like repertoire of pitches that he has, because you see that at the major leagues where like guys are constantly tinkering, and it's not always a bad thing to be tinkering with pitches. You got to find a new way to one up a hitter, and Cole's really, really good at that. Max, what do you got your eye on? I know there's a lot of guys that are going to be up in Tennessee this year that you got to see in South Bend. Anybody up there in particular that you got your eye on, hoping for big things this year?
Well, obviously, I think we're all super pumped to see what a full year of Matt Shaw looks like, where he starts, certainly where he finishes, and where he is by the All-Star break. Same with Cade Horton, right? What can OC do after everything that he did last year? Like, I watched that kid hit an opposite field spring training home run last week. That was just like, I mean, it was chef's kiss. It was like that was if he can do that consistently, sky's the limit. I would say guy I'm looking forward to next year in Tennessee, Moises Ballesteros, because I don't think that we really truly knew who Moises was going into last year outside of we knew, hey, there's this young teenager with certainly not your prototypical build down in Myrtle who's playing really well. And then BK and I got to see him for so long. And now he's going to be a guy who's, not top of the scouting report, but he's become somebody who is going to be an issue when you're coming into play the Smokies in a series. And the thing is, the eye is always going to play. And his bat-to-ball skills are so tremendous that you just think it's so hard to get that guy out, no matter what your stuff is, lefty, righty, if you're high velo, if you're sinker, if you're a big slider guy and you're a lefty too. It's just so hard to find a way to get that guy out, let alone consistently. And he's just fascinating, right? Because, he's 5'11". What's he going to look like coming back this year too? He's going to have thinned out a little bit, maybe added a little bit of muscle, because that guy can hit it absolutely anywhere on the field. He can go draw 3 walks in a game. He's got that, BJ Murray, Bryce Wyndham eye, which is just fantastic. I'm pumped to see what Ballesteros does this year, because if he can replicate, all of a sudden he's on any prospect list you're going to see, obviously, right, for the Cubs, and that wasn't the case before. And it was a lot of people, I think, looking at it and seeing like, oh, this guy's producing, but, is this really going to be a thing? And he's produced so consistently at such a high level that now you have to take him into consideration. And I'm pumped to see what he's going to do next year, because, they always talk about the jump in pitching quality and how much fewer mistakes there are and guys hitting their spots and being able to pitch, with a game plan to every individual hitter. Well, I don't think he's going to be ever phased by anybody at any level, because he's just that mature with his eye. He knows what pitches to swing at. He knows how to barrel up just about everything. If he can hit with a little bit more power too, because we started seeing that a lot, like pull side power from Ballesteros, he can put it over the video board at Four Winds Field. Yeah, really looking forward to him this year.
What was a Ballesteros batting practice like?
I don't even. I feel like he's actually pretty easy. He can hit a lot of home runs, but I don't think he's out there like Felix is putting him on the tiki hut and trying to hit it out to the Corona Beach House thing that I don't even think most people know is there. But he's hit one over there. But even if you've been to Fort Worth Field, you might not know where that is. It's like 474 feet to left center. But yeah, I mean, like when McGeary took BP, he was angry at the baseball, and the baseball was, about to get it, and we were never going to see that baseball again. And Felix was similar. I think Ballesteros is like more of an in-game kind of power guy. Like he'll hit out in BP, but he's not trying to like out there impress anybody. He knows his game.
BK, I think it was you. We were in Peoria last year. It was when Kevin Alcantara was dealing with the lower body, like the leg injury, and he was kind of like working his way back. I've told this story on the podcast before, and he went up there taking BP, even though he couldn't really use his legs at all. And he went up there and was just swinging top half, like he was only using his arms to hit, and he was hitting them like over the berm in left field in Peoria. And I was like, what the hell? Like, who is this guy? And it was honestly, like, it was one of the more impressive things I've ever seen a hitter do, because you could sit there and watch him, and like legs were not being used one single bit. It was just a top hand swing. It was incredible. I don't know if you remember that specifically, but it stuck with me very clearly.
Yeah, I remember standing there with you, and I think we kind of exchanged words of, maybe you said something like, what's he dealing with right now or something, and I kind of just nudged my head over, like, look at his legs, right? It's like you said. I mean, this dude's hitting tanks. Yeah, I mean, there was one memory from last year too. He hit a grand slam line drive off the batter's eye.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. That swing. I mean, when we say line drive too, I mean, that ball had zero arc to it, right? It was just straight match.
I think that was your call, wasn't it, BK?
Yeah.
It was a great call on that one.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, I mean, so that's a nice little memory. I mean, for Max and I, we definitely owe it to some guys like that for even getting us able to call that. I mean, right? So I mean, we've gotten to call some talent over the years, and we are both super grateful because it has resulted in pretty good tape.
All right, fellas, I appreciate you guys so much for coming on the show. I'll give you guys both a chance to plug yourselves, what you've been doing recently, where to find you on social media, all that good stuff. I'll kick it to BK first.
Yeah, always appreciate it, Greg. Just on Twitter at BKingSports, Instagram is Brendan King Show, and really just gearing up. Going to be out in AZ, so probably get some content out there, and then like I said, big game in Terre Haute, March 19th, ESPN Plus, Indiana State, Indiana. The rivalry is back on. Hoosiers and the Trees.
I love it, Max. Where can we find you?
Hoosiers have been ranked this year too. Very, very quality Big Ten squad. Well, I'll be at Columbia, Missouri starting tomorrow. 4 games in 3 days as Mizzou plays at home versus Purdue Fort Wayne, the Fighting Mastodons.
Nice.
Dons.
So that'll be fun. You got a doubleheader Saturday, first doubleheader of the year. Wish me luck. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, so we will see exactly how that goes. It would be perfect to start the year, first baseball game with some weather delays, but got that to look forward to. Got some other stuff on the horizon as well. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at Max Thoma. It's a really creative name there. MAXTHOMA is how you spell my name. A lot of people think it's Thomas, and I'm still spelling it wrong. So that's play. And then I'm on Instagram at MaxThoma_PXP. So that's me. My phone's down to 3%, but we made it. I have been at the gas station for an hour and 10 minutes, and nobody's come up to me. If you've seen me distracted, there were a couple of cops circling at the other gas station.
I'm glad everything's okay, though. I'm glad that nobody's approached you. You're all good. Again, guys, I can't.
Sir, get out of the car. Sir, get out of the car right now.
Well, it's kind of like an ominous, foreboding way that I'm shooting this. You just expected somebody over the last hour to put their hand right here, right?
I've been fully expecting that the whole time. Guys, can't thank you enough for coming on. We'll have you on throughout the season as well. Everybody out there, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this South Bend Cubs preview. You can find us anywhere where you find your podcast. You can find us on the North Side Bound YouTube page. Give us a like, give us a comment on what you think the South Bend Cubs season looks like in 2024. Subscribe if you could. Can't thank you guys enough for your support. Really excited for the season to take place. We'll be back next week with a Myrtle Beach Pelicans preview with Sam Wiederhaft. Thank you guys, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Yeah.